The air in the conference room turned electric as Victoria Pierce burst through the doors, designer heels clicking like warning shots against marble. 5-inch stilettos, a handbag worth more than most people's monthly salary, and rage burning in her eyes. "You think you can just erase me?" She spat at the pregnant woman sitting calmly at the table. Eleanor Morgan didn't flinch, rising slowly, one protective hand on her baby bump. She faced her husband's mistress with glacial composure. "You sent me a bill," Eleanor said, voice steady as steel, "for massages, dinners, and your time. You dared to put a price on betrayal and deliver it to the woman carrying his child." Victoria's confidence faltered as Eleanor delivered the words that would change everything. "You're not a threat, you're noise, and I no longer listen to noise." What happened next shocked Boston's elite society to its core. If you're ready to discover how one woman turned humiliation into a multi-million-dollar victory, hit that like button and subscribe now for more incredible true stories of betrayal, revenge, and redemption. They say every marriage holds secrets, but Eleanor Morgan never imagined hers would nearly destroy her, especially while carrying her first child. Married to billionaire investor Jonathan Reynolds, she believed her love story resembled a fairy tale charity gullis. Private jets, a historic mansion overlooking Boston Harbor. But beneath the glittering surface brewed a betrayal so brazen it arrived with a financial invoice. The audacity. It wasn't from her husband. A mysterious woman sent Eleanor a bill for services provided, itemized with shocking demands. Stunned and pregnant, Eleanor refused to be a victim. Instead, she crafted divorce terms so powerful they rocked Boston's elite society to its core. Eleanor Morgan first met Jonathan Reynolds at a charity auction for the Boston Symphony Orchestra. The year was 2018, the moment she spotted his dark tailored suit and confident stride across the ballroom. She felt a jolt, a mixture of caution and attraction. She had grown up hearing about powerful men from her father, William Morgan, a former director at J.P. Morgan, who used to remind her that wealth can be as ruthless as it is glamorous. Yet Jonathan's charm disarmed her. He didn't just seem wealthy, he seemed genuinely passionate about the arts, about philanthropy, about living a life of meaning. His eyes crinkled when he laughed, and when he bid $50,000 for a painting that night, he immediately donated it back to be auctioned again. "Beauty should circulate," he told her when they finally spoke, champagne flutes in hand. "Like money, neither does much good sitting still." At first glance, their life together looked plucked from a storybook. They traveled to Europe every summer, explored hidden architectural gems, and built a philanthropic foundation aimed at supporting veterans' mental health programs. Eleanor, an accomplished interior designer, had her own thriving business, establishing herself as the go-to decorator for boutique hotels in New England. As a power couple, they often shared front-page features in lifestyle magazines. Their Beacon Hill mansion boasted original hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in the library, and an elevator that glided through 4 floors of meticulously designed spaces. They hosted charity balls complete with celebrity guest lists. Raising millions for causes dear to them, the public saw them as unstoppable, the epitome of a modern altruistic duo, beautiful, brilliant, and generous behind the scenes. Though it wasn't all gleam, the seeds of resentment had begun to sprout the moment Jonathan's investment fund soared to new heights after securing backing from the Rothman family of Switzerland. As his business empire expanded, so did his ego. Meetings late into the night, lavish parties with potential investors, and whispered phone calls started to erode the closeness they once cherished. Eleanor sensed shifts in Jonathan's behavior, unexplained getaways, dinner cancellations, fleeting messages on his phone that he'd quickly hide. But Eleanor believed in second chances, in conversation over confrontation. She also believed that life was cyclical, times of closeness and distance came in waves. Unaware that a storm of betrayal was brewing just beyond her horizon, Eleanor tried to keep her trust intact, focusing on her interior design projects and the exciting news that she was finally pregnant after 2 years of trying. Eleanor grew up in a comfortable suburb outside of Philadelphia. Her father, William Morgan, served as an executive director at J.P. Morgan for nearly 3 decades. From an early age, she absorbed the language of high finance. Her father would bring home annual reports and talk about the power of compound interest and the dangers of over-leveraging. It was also at the dinner table where she first learned about the pitfalls of greed and the price one pays when ambition becomes obsession. Money doesn't change people, Ellie, her father would say. It just amplifies who they already are. By the time she met Jonathan Reynolds at that Boston Symphony auction, Eleanor was already a well-regarded interior designer. She had turned a modest inheritance from her grandmother into a small fortune by renovating and flipping undervalued brownstones in emerging Boston neighborhoods. Her well-earned confidence and thorough financial knowledge ensured she was never overshadowed by wealthy suitors. Jonathan's background, meanwhile, was more silver-spooned. Born into old-money aristocracy in Philadelphia, he attended St. Paul's before heading to Princeton. Yet what set him apart, at least in the beginning, was his ability to empathize. He did not fit the cliché of a spoiled trust fund brat. As Eleanor got to know Jonathan, she found a man who spoke passionately about social responsibility and veteran support initiatives. He created an investment fund that, according to him, prioritized ethical investments in renewable energy and technology aimed at improving society. The early days of their courtship were magical. They explored the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum hand in hand, discussing art from the Renaissance era, then grabbed late-night lobster rolls in Cambridge to keep it real, as Jonathan liked to say. Sundays were reserved for volunteer work at a veterans rehabilitation center, an activity Jonathan insisted they do to stay connected to the community. When Jonathan proposed a year later, it was on a sailboat in Nantucket Sound, the ring of vintage emerald-cut diamond, a family heirloom passed down from his grandmother. "We'll do incredible things together," Jonathan whispered into her ear. She believed him wholeheartedly. During these early years, Eleanor never doubted his sincerity. If Jonathan needed more hours at the office, she assumed it was for the fund's philanthropic goals. If he was secretive at times, she chalked it up to the demands of client confidentiality. How could she have known that beneath the facade of social consciousness and genuine heart, the seeds of infidelity would eventually take root? Running her own interior design firm had not been easy. Eleanor's first big break came when she was approached to redesign the interior of a boutique hotel in Back Bay. She spent months curating artisanal light fixtures, sourcing reclaimed wood for accent walls, and designing custom furniture that seamlessly blended comfort with minimalist aesthetics. The project earned her a feature in Architectural Digest, catapulting her into Boston's elite design circle. Eleanor soon expanded her portfolio, taking on high-profile clients. She balanced artistic vision with commercial viability, her skill lying in the ability to interpret her clients' personalities into living spaces. Rich colors and subtle textures became her signature. She believed that a home should tell a story about the people who lived there, one of warmth, openness, and the life experiences they cherished. This philosophy extended into her personal life. Eleanor was a giver, always placing others first. She volunteered at local shelters, helped new designers find footing in a competitive industry, and offered internships to promising students from underprivileged backgrounds. She possessed a quiet resilience, never one to broadcast her struggles or triumphs. Instead, she let the results speak for themselves. When she discovered she was pregnant, Eleanor's heart brimmed with joy. She envisioned a child who would inherit both her creativity and Jonathan's passion for social good. She began planning a nursery in soft grays and buttery yellows, set to be the coziest space in their enormous mansion. But amid her excitement, she noticed the first ripples of tension with Jonathan. He seemed distracted, his phone always buzzing with calls from work. Occasionally, she would overhear bits of hushed conversations that ended abruptly once she entered the room. Still, she clung to hope. Love, after all, had guided them this far, and she believed people could weather storms if they communicated openly. Little did she know, she was about to receive a wake-up call, a private invoice in the mail, a brazen challenge to her place in Jonathan's life, and a demand that would shatter her illusions of security. Reynolds Investments, Jonathan's brainchild, was initially small. He invested mostly in tech startups that promised environmental solutions, solar energy, wind turbines, and eco-friendly manufacturing. His success stories included early investments in sustainable battery technology and regenerative agriculture, which propelled the fund into the spotlight as an example of how ethical investments could also be lucrative. As the fund grew, Jonathan found himself rubbing shoulders with Boston's most prominent financiers. He attended exclusive gatherings at the Algonquin Club and private dinners in penthouse suites overlooking the Charles River. Clients flocked to him, eager to be associated with a fund that claimed to do good for the planet while multiplying returns. Those who studied Jonathan's ascent closely noticed how everything seemed to accelerate after a lavish weekend in the Hamptons hosted by none other than Edward Rothman, the reclusive Swiss banking magnate turned philanthropist. Rumors circulated about who Jonathan rubbed elbows with at weekend executives from Goldman Sachs, a few tech geniuses, and some foreign dignitaries known to hold massive generational wealth. Some friends teased Jonathan that he was transforming from a philanthropic dreamer into a cutthroat tycoon. He laughed it off, but something undeniably shifted in him. He started wearing bespoke suits from Savile Row, arrived at charity galas in a chauffeur-driven Bentley, and increasingly prized the image of success. It was as though he believed the appearance of virtue was as important, if not more so, than actual virtue. Eleanor noticed these changes. In the past, Jonathan had spoken passionately about supporting veterans struggling with PTSD. Now, he was too busy managing new deals to attend the foundation meetings. He insisted that a thriving investment fund would allow them to give more. "We're playing the long game," he'd say with a charming smile. But after each new infusion of capital, Jonathan seemed more restless. Phone calls lingered late into the night, often behind closed doors. Eleanor could sense an invisible wall erecting between them. When she tried to get his attention mentioning new designs, philanthropic initiatives, even her doctor's appointments, his replies were absent-minded and perfunctory. Despite her growing concerns, she hoped it was a phase. Many men, she reasoned, became workaholics to secure a future for their families. And with her pregnancy, perhaps Jonathan felt added pressure to expand their wealth. But those suspicions about him having secrets, whatever they were, gnawed at her. A persistent whisper in the back of her mind that refused to be silenced. A few months into her pregnancy, Eleanor started noticing anomalies that went beyond mere busyness. On Jonathan's nights out, supposedly spent with venture capitalists, he would come home with a faint trace of perfume, floral notes she had never owned. When Eleanor asked about it, he laughed it off. "You know how parties are," he said. "People hug. Your suit picks up 1,000 cents. Eleanor tried to brush it aside, but more clues surfaced: phone calls at odd hours that Jonathan would abruptly dismiss as wrong numbers. Suspicious credit card charges at a spa in the Seaport District on nights he claimed to be at the office. Plus the occasional text message from unfamiliar names, women she had never heard of. Jonathan's excuses stacked up. The tension seeped into every corner of their relationship. Their once lively breakfast chats turned into stiff, polite conversations about schedules and surface matters, no deeper connection. No spontaneous laughter. At times, Jonathan looked at her belly as though it was both a blessing and a burden. One evening, as Eleanor worked late on a new design proposal, she discovered Jonathan had left his iPad open on the kitchen counter. A message appeared, the preview reading, "Miss me already." She felt a surge of panic before she could unlock the device. Jonathan swooped in, snatched it, and wore a guarded expression. "Work stuff," he muttered. Eleanor's chest tightened. She felt her baby kick as if sensing her anxiety. That same night, she confronted Jonathan calmly. "If there's something you need to tell me, let's talk. We have a child on the way. We owe it to each other to be honest." He responded with a dismissive wave. "I'm just stressed. Eleanor, could we not create more drama?" So she stepped back. For the moment, she chose to place her faith in her husband, her unborn child, and the memories of better times. She had no idea her entire world would soon come crashing down. delivered in the form of an elegant envelope addressed to her personally, with a price tag attached that would make her blood boil. It happened on a Friday morning. Eleanor was in the foyer reviewing fabric samples when the doorbell rang, expecting a delivery of custom textiles. She opened the door to see a courier holding a small stack of envelopes. Among them was a sleek black envelope sealed with a wax stamp. No return address. Something about it radiated importance and mystery. Eleanor set the other mail aside and carefully opened the black envelope. Inside was a crisp piece of stationery that read, "Invoice to Mrs. Eleanor Reynolds. 4 evenings at the Elysium Spa and Retreat. $12,000 shopping spree at Nordstrom's designer collection. $18,000 personal items and lingerie. $15,000 fine dining at Mentone private room. Chef's tasting. $5,000 emotional labor and time as discussed. $35,000 total. $85,000 at the bottom. Scrolled in a careful, looping handwriting was a brief note. Please settle this bill promptly. These luxuries were enjoyed at your husband's request. Victoria Pierce. For a moment, Eleanor stood frozen, unable to comprehend the audacity. A mistress, a woman openly acknowledging her affair with Jonathan, was invoicing her rage, humiliation, and heartbreak collided in a single dizzying wave. She dropped the envelope, sank into a chair, and tried to steady her breathing. Her baby fluttered within her, an unsettling reminder of the stakes. Victoria Pierce. The name was unfamiliar, but Eleanor suspected it was the same person behind those suspicious messages on Jonathan's iPad. How had things escalated to a point where the woman felt confident enough to demand money directly from the wife? Eleanor spent the afternoon in a spiral of disbelief and despair. She pressed the invoice against the kitchen table, half tempted to rip it to shreds. Instead, she tried calling Jonathan, straight to voicemail. She texted him, short and direct. "We need to talk. ASAP." Hours passed without a response. By sundown, humiliation gave way to fury. How dare Victoria treat her like a business partner who simply owed her a cut of Jonathan's extravagances? How dare Jonathan remain silent? Eleanor began drafting a plan in her head, one that would safeguard her unborn child and ensure that she would never again be at the mercy of anyone's betrayal. The mistress wanted a bill settled. Eleanor would respond with something far more drastic: divorce terms that no one in their right mind would dare dismiss. Jonathan finally walked through the door at around 10:00 that night, reeking of cologne and exhaustion. Eleanor waited in the living room, the black envelope perched ominously on the coffee table. The moment he saw it, his face paled. He tried to mask his panic behind a forced smile, but Eleanor's glacial stare told him that no charade would work this time. She held up the invoice. "Want to explain this?" Her voice was low, almost calm, which unnerved Jonathan more than any outburst would have. He stammered, "It's not what you think," but the words rang hollow in the silent room. "Jonathan," Eleanor said, her voice quivering just enough to betray the emotional storm within. "I've tolerated late nights, suspicious phone calls, and secrets. But now this woman, Victoria Pierce, has crossed a line. She sent me a bill for being your mistress. That's beyond humiliation. That's cruelty." Jonathan sank into an armchair. For a moment, he covered his face with his hands. When he finally looked up, Eleanor saw a glimpse of guilt overshadowed by desperation. "Victoria," he swallowed hard. She was an investor contact. One thing led to another. It was a mistake. Eleanor held up a hand. "Stop. I don't need every sordid detail." She took a trembling breath. "What I need is respect, honesty, and space to think." He tried to move closer, to take her hand, but she pulled away. "Eleanor, I love you." "No, you don't," she said sharply. "No more empty words." She pressed a protective hand against her belly. "I have a child to consider, a future that cannot be tied to your lies and your wandering impulses." Jonathan tried to protest, but Eleanor's steely resolve shone in her eyes. She told him she would be meeting with her attorney and that she expected his cooperation in a formal separation. If not a complete divorce, he pleaded, offered to see a marriage counselor, anything to keep this from exploding into public scandal. But Eleanor's mind was already made up. She was no longer the naive, hopeful wife who believed everything could be mended with forgiveness. This betrayal, complete with a humiliating invoice, was a line in the sand, and she intended to make Jonathan and his mistress regret every cent of that $85,000 bill. As dawn broke, Eleanor found herself in a dilemma. She didn't want to face this alone, yet she hated the idea of revealing Jonathan's betrayal to friends or family. It felt too raw, too shameful, but she needed guidance. And so, with a heavy heart, she called the one person who would stand by her unconditionally, her old law school friend, Sarah Goldstein. Sarah was a partner at Goldstein and Associates, specializing in high net worth divorces. They had remained close since Harvard Law, bonding over late-night study sessions and endless debates about gender equality in the legal profession. Sarah had always admired Eleanor's warmth and creativity, just as Eleanor admired Sarah's fierce intellect and unwavering loyalty. When Eleanor arrived at Sarah's Brookline townhouse, she clutched the incriminating invoice like a damning piece of evidence. Sarah's eyes widened as she read the details, her face flushing with indignation. What kind of sociopath demands money from a pregnant wife for entertaining her husband? Sarah asked, outraged. Eleanor sighed, tears brimming. This is what my life has become. I feel humiliated and lost. I don't want to remain married to him if this is how he treats me. But I also need to protect myself, and especially the baby. Sarah set aside her coffee mug. I'll help you navigate this. We'll make sure you get what you deserve. Jonathan is wealthy, and you've invested years of emotional labor and your own funds into this marriage. You should be compensated, especially with a child on the way. Relief flooded Eleanor. I've been so afraid. Jonathan's influence is enormous. The press loves him. I don't want to be seen as some gold digger or a scorned woman looking for revenge. Sarah's gaze hardened. Don't you dare blame yourself if he wants to flaunt his mistress's bills. We'll see how he handles real legal action. Let's prepare for the worst. It might get ugly, but you won't face it alone. Then Sarah revealed something that sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. Eleanor, you're not the first in the past 6 months. I've had 2 other clients come to me with nearly identical situations, wives receiving itemized bills from mistresses. It's like some twisted new power play in Boston's elite circles. You're kidding, Eleanor whispered. I wish I were. One was married to a surgeon at Mass General, the other to a tech executive. Both received neatly typed invoices from their husbands' mistresses. It's calculated humiliation. Eleanor felt her stomach turn. So I'm just another trophy in some sick game. Sarah shook her head firmly. No, you're going to be the one who fights back so hard they never try this again. The other women settled quietly. You won't have to. With that conversation, Eleanor felt a spark of hope. She had an ally, someone who believed in her worth and had the legal chops to fight for it. The next move was to draft a set of divorce terms so formidable that Victoria's petty invoice would look like spare change in comparison. That night, back at the Beacon Hill mansion, Eleanor experienced a sharp pain in her abdomen. She noticed spotting a small amount of blood that sent fear coursing through her. The emergency room doctor assured her the baby was fine, but warned her about stress. Your blood pressure is concerning, Mrs. Reynolds. At 5 months pregnant, you need to minimize stress. Is there something going on at home? Eleanor fought back tears. I'm handling some personal matters. The doctor gave her a knowing look. Whatever it is, it can wait. Your baby can't. Those words cemented Eleanor's resolve. This wasn't just about her pride anymore. It was about protecting the innocent life growing inside her. She would not allow Jonathan's betrayal to harm their child. Days passed as Sarah and Eleanor meticulously prepared the divorce papers. They combed through Jonathan's assets, from his shares in renewable energy companies to real estate holdings in Boston, New York, and even a small horse farm in Vermont. It was a painstaking process, but each detail added another brick to Eleanor's protective wall. During this time, Jonathan vacillated between begging forgiveness and lashing out. He bombarded Eleanor with frantic calls, alternately promising to end things with Victoria and accusing Eleanor of overreacting. Her silence only fueled his desperation, but the mistress, Victoria Pierce, had other plans. She was about to make her move, determined to ensure she wasn't dismissed as a fling. One morning, Eleanor awoke to a flurry of missed calls from unknown numbers. Confused, she checked her voicemail. "Mrs. Reynolds, we're reporters from the Boston Herald. We'd love a comment on the rumor that your husband might be leaving you for Miss Pierce." Her heart raced as she realized Victoria had leaked the affair to the press. Within hours, paparazzi swarmed her townhouse, snapping photos of Eleanor with her baby bump, shouting questions about the woman who sent you a bill. Panicked, Eleanor called Sarah, who advised her to stay indoors and not respond publicly. "Any statement now could be twisted," Sarah cautioned. "Let's finalize the divorce terms first." Chummersharm. But Victoria wasn't done. She posted cryptic photos on social media, hinting at a luxurious lifestyle spa visits, helicopter rides, lavish dinners. In one particularly brazen post, she wore a diamond bracelet that Eleanor recognized as Jonathan's gift during their first anniversary trip to Paris. The caption read, "When he knows how to keep a woman happy." Eleanor's fury threatened to consume her. This woman's audacity was unrelenting. She was not simply content with an affair. She craved publicity, as though flaunting her conquest of a billionaire husband was a twisted badge of honor. While Jonathan tried to contain the media fallout, Eleanor focused on her unborn child. She felt the baby's kicks more frequently now, a constant reminder that she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for a secure future for her little one, free from the toxic betrayal that had marred the family's foundations. The tension surged to a boiling point. If Victoria thought she could manipulate the narrative and paint Eleanor as a hapless victim, she had underestimated the strength and cunning of the woman she had so brazenly provoked. The phone refused to stop ringing journalists, bloggers, even former acquaintances looking for gossip. Everyone seemed ravenous for a scoop. Eleanor leaned against her kitchen counter, trying to steady her breath. Jonathan had left frantic messages. "Don't do this. Eleanor, we can weather the storm. I'll cut Victoria out of my life." But a single glance at the black envelope pinned to her fridge reminded her why she couldn't stay silent any longer. She grabbed her keys and left the townhouse, escorted by a private security guard Sarah had arranged to keep paparazzi at bay. Her destination was the offices of Goldstein and Associates, where she would finalize her decision to file for divorce. Once inside Sarah's glass-walled conference room, she was greeted by towering stacks of documents. "This is it, then, the official separation," she said softly. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "I know it's overwhelming, but we've made sure every detail is covered. Spousal support, child support, property division, you name it." Eleanor nodded, flipping through the pages. Her eyes landed on the settlement figure, an amount so staggering it seemed surreal. But as Sarah reminded her, Jonathan's personal fortune had soared into the billions. The sum was only a fraction of his empire, yet more than enough to ensure a comfortable life for Eleanor and the baby. "Are you sure you're ready for the media circus this might spark?" Sarah asked, her voice gentle. "Divorce with these stakes is bound to attract even more attention." Eleanor inhaled deeply, recalling the humiliating bill Victoria had sent. She imagined the quiet life she wanted for her child, free from secrets and humiliations. "I'm ready," she said, signing the necessary forms. With that pen stroke, she severed the bonds that had once been the cornerstone of her love story. No matter the chaos to come, she resolved that her child would never look at her with the sorrow of a mother too fearful to stand up for herself. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear the moment she walked out of that office. She would be Eleanor Morgan again, soon to be ex-wife of a billionaire, and a woman determined to forge a new beginning. The documents lay neatly stacked on Sarah's conference room table, a quiet storm bound in crisp legal formatting. Eleanor stared at the title page, Draft Reynolds versus Reynolds Dissolution of Marriage Agreement, and felt her chest tighten with a rush of conflicting emotions. This was no longer about heartbreak. This was about reclaiming her power, securing her child's future, and sending a message to a man who had treated her love as expendable. Sarah slid the top page toward her. It's all here, everything we discussed. I've made sure no one can accuse you of being vindictive. This is clean, comprehensive, and bulletproof. Together they reviewed the details one more time. The settlement began with the foundation generous spousal maintenance tied to a fixed percentage of Jonathan's annual earnings, calculated to grow proportionally with the success of Reynolds' investments, given his billions in holdings and assets. It would ensure Eleanor lived not just comfortably, but independently. Child support came next, a secure figure that would be reviewed annually with adjustments for inflation. Healthcare costs, and private education from kindergarten to Ivy League. Sarah had even included contingencies, full coverage for a nanny, prenatal and postnatal care, and a clause that Jonathan would be legally responsible for any emergency medical expenses for both mother and child, no matter the cost. Then came the trust fund. Your child, Sarah said softly, will have full access to a $30 million trust by age 25. You'll manage it as guardian until then. No interference. Eleanor nodded, feeling the protective mother in her rising. He or she wouldn't grow up wondering if they were worthy. Real estate was next. Eleanor would retain full ownership of the Cape Cod estate, historic, sprawling, and quietly luxurious. It wasn't just property, it was legacy, and she would make sure it became a haven of stability for her child. The Beacon Hill mansion, their former marital home, would be liquidated. The proceeds would be split. But only after Eleanor received a payout for the renovations and interior design work she had done herself her own touch. Her artistry finally acknowledged as valuable. But perhaps the most telling section of the settlement came in the form of two unusual clauses. The first, profit sharing in Reynolds' investments. Though Jonathan had always been its public face, Eleanor had helped shape its philanthropic identity. Her introductions, her public speaking, her networking in philanthropic circles had brought in over a dozen major investors. Sarah had argued and documented those contributions in detail. Every man builds his empire on the back of someone, Sarah said, and you were the one holding him up. Now the world will know it. The second clause was symbolic and cathartic. It was labeled compensatory damages for emotional distress and public humiliation, a direct response to the infamous Mistress invoice Victoria had so boldly sent. Sarah tapped the section. $5 million. It won't undo what she did, but it's a message. Eleanor didn't smile, but her eyes hardened with clarity. She sent me a bill, she murmured, so I'm sending her the invoice she wasn't expecting. At the end of the document, a confidentiality agreement sealed the terms. If Jonathan or Victoria leaked any personal details or attempted to slander Eleanor's name in the press, the financial penalties would be swift and severe. It was, as Sarah put it, the legal equivalent of a velvet hammer. Eleanor set down the pen and looked at Sarah. Do you think he'll sign? Sarah leaned back. He'll fume, he'll curse, but he'll sign if he doesn't. We take it to court, and Victoria's antics become courtroom evidence. Jonathan knows exactly how much he stands to lose. Eleanor breathed deeply, her hand resting on her belly. This isn't about revenge. It's about respect. For myself. For my child. Sarah nodded. Exactly. Without another word. Eleanor picked up the pen and signed her name. It was elegant. It was final. And it was worth every dollar. She had entered the fight with her dignity in tatters. Now she was walking out with her name, her future, and a multi-million-dollar reminder that some women don't break, they build. Jonathan Reynolds stared at the divorce settlement as if it were written in fire. Every clause, every figure, every line item was a monument to the reality he had so carefully tried to avoid. Eleanor wasn't bluffing. She wasn't broken. She had turned every ounce of betrayal into strategy, and he was holding the evidence of it in his trembling hands. His office at Reynolds Investments, once a sanctuary of ego and ambition, now felt like a gilded cage. The sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows offered no comfort. The city below, which once bowed to his every whim, now looked indifferent. He grabbed his phone and dialed Eleanor. She answered on the third ring, her voice cool, steady. "You've seen the papers? I assume—" "You're out of your mind," Jonathan snapped. "These demands are insane. Half the Cape Cod estate a profit share in my fund. You didn't build any of that. I built your brand." Eleanor replied calmly. "I gave speeches, hosted events, introduced you to investors who believed in our shared vision. And I carried your child while your mistress was out shopping with your black card." Jonathan fell silent. She continued, voice low but firm. "I'm done arguing. This is about what I'm owed, what our child is owed." He tried to pivot. "I never meant for it to go this far. Victoria was a mistake. I'll make it right. I'll end it." "You ended it the moment you let her send me a bill," she said. "Now I'm just collecting what's due." He clenched his jaw. "If this goes public, it'll destroy me." "Then sign quietly," she answered. "Or drag it out and let the world watch." The call ended. Jonathan hurled the phone across the room. It hit the glass wall with a sharp crack, but didn't shatter. Just like Eleanor. She didn't break. She simply became sharper. He sat back down and ran a hand through his hair. In his mind, she had always been the quiet one, the soft-spoken designer who stood by his side, smiled for the cameras, and forgave easily. He never expected her to outmaneuver him. He never imagined she would be the one to bring him to his knees. But now, for the first time in his life, Jonathan Reynolds had lost not in business, not on paper, but where it mattered most, in Eleanor. She had just begun to win. The headlines didn't slow down, if anything. Victoria Pierce's outrageous behavior had poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The press had a field day. Rumors swirled across Boston's elite social circuits, mixing fact and fabrication into a sensational cocktail of betrayal, scandal, and high society drama. Reynolds' showdown. Mistress crashes negotiations. The $85,000 invoice that triggered $1 million divorce. Pregnant wife outsmarts billionaire, husband and mistress. Eleanor didn't bother reading most of it. She stayed focused. The settlement was still pending, and Jonathan's legal team, led by the notoriously aggressive Martin Steinfeld, had not backed down, if anything. They were doubling down, working to undermine her role in Jonathan's empire, attacking her emotional distress claims, and trying to portray her as a woman using pregnancy to secure wealth. It was a ruthless strategy, but Sarah had anticipated every move. While Steinfeld launched his offensive, Sarah went on the defensive and then the offensive of her own, through a calculated anonymous leak to a reputable gossip columnist. A key piece of the narrative hit the media like lightning: the original invoice Victoria had sent to Eleanor. Public opinion, which had been somewhat divided, swung sharply in Eleanor's favor. The image of a pregnant woman receiving a demand for spa bills and emotional labor from her husband's mistress sent shockwaves through society. Victoria Pierce quickly became a cautionary tale, lampooned online, mocked on talk shows, and widely seen as a greedy opportunist who had overplayed her hand. She actually sent a bill. One late-night host joked, "Was there a line item for betrayal with interest?" when the media, once circling Eleanor like vultures, now began referring to her with a new moniker, the Graceful Storm. But it wasn't just a PR win. Behind the scenes, the damage to Jonathan's carefully curated public image was substantial. Reynolds Investments, which prided itself on socially responsible investing, was suddenly the subject of investor scrutiny. Several high-profile clients privately reached out to Jonathan's partners with concerns. Rumors began to surface that certain board members were considering asking him to step down as CEO, temporarily if not permanently, and Jonathan felt it. For the first time in his professional life, he wasn't in control. In private emails and messages, he vacillated between fury and panic. He texted Eleanor several times a day, attempting to spin everything. "Let's talk. I didn't expect her to do this. I never meant for you to get dragged into this. I still love you." Eleanor never replied. The silence was strategic and empowering. Instead, she met with Sarah daily to refine the settlement. adjusting child support to scale with inflation, inserting clauses that would secure access to trust funds for the child, and demanding formal recognition of her contributions to the fund's public image. Every speech you gave, Sarah reminded her, every gala you hosted, every introduction you made that has value, don't let them erase that, Jonathan's team countered. They attempted to settle under the table, offering a smaller figure in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. They framed it as a dignified solution. Eleanor saw it for what it was, a final attempt to hush the truth. Her answer was firm, no deal without justice, while her name was being tossed around dinner parties and editorial columns. Eleanor stayed grounded. She focused on her health, her baby's well-being, and her own mental clarity. Prenatal yoga, calls with her mother, and long walks in the public garden became her sacred rituals. She journaled often, not about pain but about resilience. And when news broke that Victoria Pierce had fled the city, her social media gone dark, her brand in tatters, Eleanor didn't celebrate. She simply felt done. Jonathan's world was imploding. His empire strained under public pressure. His charm, once his strongest weapon, had lost its power, and now, cornered on all sides. He agreed to a final meeting. The room was the same one where Victoria had once thrown a tantrum, but this time, Eleanor was calm, commanding, and utterly unmoved. On one side, Jonathan and his legal team, their expressions guarded. On the other, Eleanor, Sarah, and the full weight of truth on their side. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about legacy, and Eleanor had no intention of walking away with anything less than everything she and her child deserved. Eleanor had expected the legal negotiations to be tense. She had not expected Victoria Pierce to storm through the doors of the law firm in 5-inch stilettos, a designer handbag clutched in one manicured hand and a folded legal document in the other like it was a weapon. It was midday, and the conference room was quiet. On one side sat Eleanor, Sarah, and a composed junior associate. On the other, Jonathan and his lawyer, Martin Steinfeld, who had been carefully reviewing the final draft of the divorce settlement. That delicate calm shattered when the door burst open. "You think you can just erase me?" Victoria's voice sliced through the air, shrill and furious. Everyone turned. "Victoria, this is a private," Steinfeld began, rising from his seat. She ignored him and marched straight to Eleanor, her heels clicking with sharp finality. "Mrs. Reynolds," she sneered, "you have no idea what's coming. Christian made promises. I was there for him when he needed someone. I deserve to be compensated." Eleanor didn't flinch. She sat tall, her baby bump visible beneath her cream-knit dress, her face an unreadable mask of calm. "Compensated?" Eleanor asked softly, as though tasting the word. "Yes," Victoria snapped, waving the letter in her hand. "I have a statement from my lawyer. I've been threatened, silenced, and now you want to walk away with everything like I was never part of it." Jonathan rose then, his expression a mix of panic and disbelief. "Victoria, stop. We've already talked about this. You weren't supposed to—" "Oh, I'm done waiting," she snapped at him, turning back to Eleanor. "I won't be erased. I was with him for months while you were playing perfect wife. I was the one keeping him sane. You think you're the victim? Please. This world doesn't reward women who play it safe. It rewards women who fight." Sarah stood now, placing herself subtly between Eleanor and the raging woman. "You're trespassing, Miss Pierce, and from what I can tell, you've just attempted to issue a demand under threat. On record." Victoria rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the lawyer routine. You're just mad I spoke first." Eleanor slowly stood, her calm unnerving. She walked past Sarah, past Jonathan, until she stood directly in front of Victoria, close enough to see the sweat beating beneath the woman's flawless foundation. "You sent me a bill," Eleanor said, voice steady. "For massages, for dinners, for time. You dared to put a price on betrayal and deliver it to the woman carrying his child." Victoria's lips parted, but no words came. Eleanor took a small breath. "Let me make something very clear. You are not owed a cent. You were a willing participant in someone else's marriage. And if Jonathan promised you something, take it up with him. But you will never again speak to me. Never send me anything. Never show up in my space. Sarah chimed in. If you do, Ms. Pierce will file for harassment and a restraining order. Jonathan looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Victoria, leave. Victoria glared at him. You're a coward. He didn't argue. Eleanor continued, her voice now cool and clear. You came here today to prove something, but all you did was confirm what I already knew. You're not a threat. You're noise, and I no longer listen to noise. Victoria's confidence cracked. She turned to Jonathan one last time. Don't think this is over. Then she stormed out, the echo of her heels fading down the hallway. For a long moment, the room was still. Then Sarah let out a slow exhale. Well, that saves us a subpoena. Eleanor sat back down and glanced at Jonathan. He couldn't meet her eyes. The mistress had shown her cards and folded. Eleanor, meanwhile, had just proven to everyone in that room that there was only one woman worthy of the Reynolds name, and she had no intention of giving it up quietly. The hospital room was unnervingly quiet. Machines beeped steadily, monitoring Eleanor and the baby as nurses came and went in soft-soled shoes. Jonathan sat in the corner, watching her sleep. He looked smaller now, his usual commanding presence wilted under guilt and exhaustion. The bags under his eyes weren't from stress alone. They were from shame, earlier that morning. A new test had revealed complications with Eleanor's pregnancy. Though the baby's vitals were stable, doctors warned of heightened risk. Bed rest is crucial, the specialist had said firmly, and minimal emotional stress. You're both strong, but your body needs protection now more than ever. Eleanor had nodded, her lips pressed tightly together. She wasn't scared of pain. She had lived with worse. But the possibility of losing her child because of Jonathan's betrayal, that thought was unbearable. Jonathan had lingered at her bedside all day, offering water, fluffing pillows, whispering apologies. Eleanor didn't trust any of it. Still, she allowed him to stay. Not out of forgiveness, but because she wanted answers. As dusk fell and the baby's heartbeat echoed gently in the background, she finally asked, "Why?" Jonathan hesitated. She turned her head slowly to face him. No more deflections, no more PR statements. I deserve to know. He looked away for a long moment, then took a slow breath. It wasn't love, he began, voice brittle. It wasn't even lust. At first, it was leverage. Eleanor's brow furrowed. Jonathan swallowed hard. Victoria, she was connected to a group of potential investors. Old money, European banking families. One of them wanted favors, introductions, visibility. Victoria offered access. She played her role. I played mine. You used her to close deals? Eleanor asked, horrified. He nodded miserably. At first, yes, then she got comfortable. She wanted more. I didn't stop it. I thought I could control it, contain it. Eleanor's hand trembled slightly as she touched her belly. And me? What was I, a prop for your public image? No, he said quickly, standing. Never. You were the only real thing in my life. I know that now. But you didn't know it then, she replied flatly. Not when you let your mistress invoice me. Not when you lied. Not when you put our child at risk. He couldn't meet her eyes. I thought I married a man with vision, she said softly, tears welling but not falling. Instead, I married someone who sold his soul for quarterly gains. Jonathan moved closer. Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. She looked at him, weary but unwavering. You can't undo this, but you can stay out of my way while I protect what you nearly destroyed. That night, as Jonathan left the room, shoulders slumped under the weight of his own undoing, Eleanor reached for the small ultrasound photo taped beside her bed. She ran her fingers over the black and white blur of her baby's tiny face. I'll do better, she whispered to her unborn child. For both of us. The betrayal was complete, but so was her resolve. The week Eleanor spent in the hospital passed in a haze of fluorescent lights, whispered check-ins, and quiet determination. Her condition had stabilized. The baby was strong, and doctors were optimistic. But emotionally, Eleanor was still reeling not from fear of the future, but from finally accepting the irrevocable truth her marriage to Jonathan was over. Jonathan visited often. He brought flowers, asked about the baby, and hovered like a man trying to rewind a clock already broken. But Eleanor no longer softened at his gestures. She spoke to him kindly but distantly, the tone of a woman who had drawn a line and refused to cross it again. "You made your choices," she told him during one of his visits. "Now I'm making mine." While Eleanor recovered, Sarah worked tirelessly behind the scenes. The updated divorce terms were not just strategic, they were airtight. Every clause protected Eleanor's physical health, emotional well-being, and financial future. Any further medical care or complications from the pregnancy would be covered in full. The child support agreement wasn't just generous. It was indexed to Jonathan's investment growth and protected from fluctuation. A separate education fund would guarantee the child access to top institutions. No matter what scandals might affect the Reynolds name in the years ahead, Jonathan's legal team reviewed the documents in tense silence. They knew they had no leverage left. His mistress had imploded their case with one reckless outburst. His reputation, though salvaged publicly with a carefully crafted press release, was in tatters behind closed doors. Investors were uneasy. Board members had whispered about voting him out, and Eleanor, graceful as ever, had won without ever stepping into the mud. With quiet reluctance, Jonathan signed. No outburst, no final attempt at persuasion, just the scratch of pen on paper, the official end of the marriage he had ruined. The following afternoon, Eleanor was released from the hospital. Her steps were slow, cautious, but every movement radiated purpose. Paparazzi waited outside the private entrance. She walked past them calmly, sunglasses on, a protective hand resting on her baby bump. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any headline ever could. A car arranged by Sarah whisked her away not to the mansion she once shared with Jonathan, but to a sleek, sunlit condo in Back Bay. One Eleanor had secured under her own name. The space was modern and warm, designed by one of her former protégés and gifted to her as a gesture of solidarity. As she stepped inside, something in her exhaled, not relief, not triumph, freedom. There were still boxes to unpack, nursery plans to finalize, and 1,000 small tasks to prepare for motherhood. But for the first time in months, maybe even years, she felt weightless. Her name was hers again, her space, her future, in the weeks that followed. The media cycle shifted. Victoria Pierce, once smug and calculating, faded from the spotlight. Her attempt to provoke Eleanor into public humiliation had backfired spectacularly. After her tantrum at the law firm and failed attempt at extortion, no outlet wanted to hear her side. She had become a punchline, not a headline. Jonathan maintained a dignified silence, releasing a statement that read, "After careful reflection, Ms. Morgan and I have decided to part ways amicably. I remain committed to supporting her and our child with the utmost respect and privacy." But Eleanor didn't need his words. She had everything she needed: her own business, her child, and a renewed sense of who she was. She resumed design work slowly, starting with remote consultations and vision boards. Her first client post-settlement was a new wellness retreat in Cape Cod. The space, she decided, would be built on themes of renewal, balance, and quiet strength. In a way, it mirrored her own rebirth. Her friends returned, some with apologies for not seeing the cracks sooner, others simply offering support without explanation. Eleanor welcomed them with open arms. She had no energy for bitterness, only forward momentum. In late spring, on a rare sunny Boston morning, the unexpected happened. While reviewing fabric samples for a client, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Sarah. "You won't believe this," Sarah said, a mix of disbelief and amusement in her voice. "Victoria Pierce is being investigated by the SEC. Apparently, she was gathering insider information from her relationships and passing it on to a group of investors. Jonathan's among those implicated. Eleanor sat down slowly, a hand on her now prominent belly. He said she was leverage for investors. I didn't realize how literal that was. It gets better, Sarah continued. She's turning state's evidence. Says Jonathan was fully aware of the scheme from the beginning, that the affair was just a cover for their real partnership financial fraud. A strange calm washed over Eleanor. Not vindication, not even shock. Just the final piece of a puzzle she had been assembling for months. What does this mean for the settlement? She asked. Nothing changes for you, Sarah assured her. Your divorce is finalized. Your assets are protected. But Jonathan, he's facing serious charges. The board at Reynolds Investments has already asked for his resignation. After the call ended, Eleanor stood by the window of her new home. Watching the city bustle below, she felt her baby kick strong, determined little movements that made her smile despite everything. The mistress had sent a bill. Eleanor had sent divorce terms. And now, it seemed, the universe was sending justice. 2 weeks later. The doorbell rang. Eleanor, now well into her third trimester, moved cautiously to answer it. Outside stood a courier with a small package. No return address. For a moment, her heart raced. Another black envelope, another assault on her peace. But when she opened the package, she found a simple white card with elegant handwriting. To Ms. Eleanor Morgan. I was wrong about everything. You were not the enemy. You were not the obstacle. You were the one person who saw through the facade of power and ambition to the hollow center. I wish I could say this is an apology, but words seem inadequate for the harm I caused. Instead, I'm sending information that may help other women avoid the trap I set. What Jonathan and I did, it wasn't just to you. There were others. The enclosed USB drive contains evidence that my lawyer is also providing to authorities. You won't hear from me again. I'm facing my own consequences now. As I should. V.P. Eleanor stared at the card for a long moment. Then she placed it and the USB drive in a drawer. She would give it to Sarah later. For now. She had nursery colors to finalize and a birth plan to review. Some battles were worth fighting. Others were simply worth walking away from. And Eleanor Morgan had finally learned the difference. On a warm June day, with summer light streaming through hospital windows, Eleanor gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Sophia Wisdom, a reminder of what had carried her through darkness into light. As she held her daughter for the first time, tracing the perfect curve of her cheek, Eleanor felt tears of pure joy. This small being, this miracle of creation, had no idea of the storms that had raged before her arrival. She would know only the calm after, the peace her mother had fought for. Jonathan sent flowers and a request to visit. Eleanor agreed, setting clear boundaries. When he entered the hospital room, his eyes immediately went to the tiny bundle in Eleanor's arms. She's perfect, he whispered. Yes, Eleanor said simply. She is. He stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, a fallen titan now facing federal charges, his empire crumbling, his reputation in ruins. I wanted to tell you, he said finally, that I've reached a plea deal. Part of it includes liquidating assets to pay fines. I've instructed my lawyers to ensure that your settlement is prioritized. You and Sophia will have everything we agreed to, regardless of what happens to me. Eleanor nodded. It wasn't forgiveness she felt. It was closure. Thank you for that, she said. Sophia deserves security. Can I hold her? He asked, his voice small. Eleanor hesitated, then nodded, as she placed their daughter in his arms. She saw tears in his eyes, perhaps the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him in years. I'll do better, he promised, echoing her own words from months before. For her sake. Eleanor didn't respond. Promises meant little. Actions would tell the real story. Over time, 6 months later. Eleanor sat in her new office in Back Bay. Morgan Designs read the elegant sign on the door. Her company had pivoted, finding an unexpected niche, redesigning spaces for women in transition, divorces, career changes, empty nest moments when women needed their surroundings to reflect their evolution. Business was booming. Her story, now widely known in Boston social circles, had become a different kind of currency, one based on authenticity and resilience rather than wealth and status. Sarah stopped by often, sometimes with legal papers, more often with wine and laughter. They had created a small foundation together, offering grants to women facing similar struggles, pregnant women dealing with betrayal, mothers rebuilding after divorce. They called it the Invoice Project, a reclamation of the very thing that had once been meant to humiliate. As for Victoria Pierce, she had indeed kept her word. After providing evidence that led to several high-profile arrests in the financial sector, she disappeared from public view. Rumor had it she'd moved to Seattle, changed her name, started over. Eleanor hoped, in some quiet corner of her heart, that Victoria had found a better path. Jonathan served a reduced sentence. Part of his plea deal for cooperation, the scandal rocked Boston's financial world, exposing a network of insider trading and fraud that had operated for years beneath the veneer of philanthropy and social responsibility. Reynolds Investments was restructured, renamed, with new leadership promising true ethical investing. On Sophia's first birthday, Eleanor hosted a small gathering at her Back Bay home. As friends and family celebrated the joyful, curious little girl with her mother's eyes and determined spirit, Eleanor caught a glimpse of her own reflection in a window. She barely recognized the woman, looking back stronger, calmer, more certain of her worth than she had ever been. The mistress had sent a bill, expecting Eleanor to crumble under the weight of humiliation. Instead, Eleanor had sent back divorce terms worth millions. Yes, but more importantly, terms that reclaimed her dignity, secured her future, and rewrote her story. As she blew out the single candle on Sophia's cake, helping her daughter's tiny hands with the task, Eleanor made a silent vow. This was the legacy she would pass on. Not wealth, not status, but the unshakable knowledge that when life sends you an invoice for pain, you don't pay it, you transform it.